Admittedly, the return of Yellowjackets isn't necessarily bombastic and makes you like so excited for what's to come. But even with that said, we are shown the first act of cannibalism, and Misty, as she did for season one, really holds things down for the modern day counterparts of the 1996 crash crew. So to begin, back in 1996, it's been about maybe 2 months since Harvey disappeared, and Travis is really worried. They have from the cabin searched 7 miles in every direction, and there's pretty much no signs that Javi is alive. And while Natalie is losing hope, Travis is holding on for dear life, and it's only thanks to Lottie, who of course is starting to become this weird religious mystical figure, that Travis is able to hold on to any sort of faith. But what makes things a bit awkward is that Travis, because of all his grief and everything, it seems he has started to slowly distance himself from Natalie, especially in a sexual tense. So him getting a boner when Lottie reassures him can potentially cause issues down the line, especially if he tries to pursue something with her. But whether or not that happens, we don't know yet. Their relationship aside, Taissa and also Van are also having some issues. Mainly in the form of Taissa still having this other entity or whatever taking her over. And while that entity isn't necessarily dangerous right now, it has led to Van getting bitten, and it's challenging to the relationship, but at the same time, Van is committed in the long term. So with that, they seem okay. But who is not okay is Shauna. Jackie's corpse is being held in this shed, and Shauna goes to visit it and has full-on conversations with it, and people know. And what makes it weird is that it is definitely her way of processing her grief, but when the body kind of drops off and the ear falls off for some reason, Shauna keeps it for a while, and then later she bites into it, and it feels like that's the sign of when things start to potentially go toward cannibalism, since Shauna, even though Lottie was the one who we thought was probably the one who approached the idea, Shauna might have been the one who pushed the idea that maybe we could eat each other to stay alive, and maybe that could help us understand why Misty, when it comes to what we saw in the first season, kind of looked a little bit shocked or weird when it came to her taking that mask off. But the reason we're bringing up Misty is because she actually might have made a friend this episode, and after the mushroom incident, it seemed like that might have not been a possibility for her. Yet, one of the younger members of the team, Crystal, who likes to sing to the point of annoying other people, she seems to be willing to be friends with Misty, and so that makes you wonder if, down the line, when it comes to Misty's reaction to the person falling into that pit, was Misty someone who was trying to get revenge on Crystal for maybe not being a friend anymore? Was she trying to get back into Lottie, Shauna, and everybody else's good graces, so that's why she had that reaction? Or was it something else? It's hard to say. Switching to modern times, when it comes to anybody's marriage, it still is in a terrible place. Simone and Taissa are still not in a good place because once Simone saw the dead dog's head, she saw Sammy's doll, she knew it was all that occult stuff, and she's at the point right now where she's like, either you get help and potentially resign, or I'm going to the press and I'm going to embarrass you. And with that in mind, there's a need to question how is Taissa going to react since Simone just threatened to blow up her career. Switching over to Shauna and Jeff, Callie, I just wish she wasn't in the show. For as much as Shauna and Jeff are trying to move forward, there's still issues with the whole Adam situation, especially as they have to keep trying to cover up all the evidence. Case in point, they learn that Adam has a whole studio, and they get the key to the studio and they see that a whole section is dedicated to Shauna portraits. Jeff gets a bit jealous. Shauna reveals something about getting hot when she thought that he was cheating, and at least was sex scene, and in their own little way they're trying to get back to some form of normal, but Callie's there to remind them that this will never be normal. She cheated on you, and it seems that Callie is hell-bent on her mom getting punished. Hence, when Shauna is trying to burn away all the evidence that she has, including Adam's ID, Callie goes in afterwards and fishes out through the ashes a piece of Adam's ID which has his picture, which who knows what she may use it for down the road. Speaking of Adam and trying to get rid of the evidence, Misty is trying to do her best to prepare everybody for the eventual questioning, and only Shauna shows up for the session that she set up. This is frustrating, but knowing Taissa has this whole career thing going, she lets that go and focuses on Natalie because Natalie is supposed to be her best friend. Why did Natalie not show up? So, with that in mind, Misty decides to go to the motel, interrogate the manager. The manager allows Misty access to the room, and Misty sees the door frame and realizes somebody broke it off the frame, and we've seen there was a camera facing toward the door. You can bet that she's going to visit the hotel manager, hoping that his whole discretion thing doesn't include erasing the cameras after the day's over, or who knows if the cameras were even on in the first place. Now, as for how Natalie's doing right now, originally she was tied to a bed, but because Lottie's minions are no match for Natalie, she's able to get the best of one of them and get freedom, but she isn't able to escape. Luckily though, because Lottie spots her before something bad happens, things calm down, at least in terms of Lottie's people trying to attack her. But clearly Natalie has a lot of questions that need answered, and hopefully in the next episode we'll get a lot of those answers. So right now, in terms of highlights, it's purely the 1996 portion. I don't want to put down the modern day versions of these characters, but the 1996 versions are the setup for anything that could be interesting for the modern versions. So when it comes to Shauna talking to Jackie and eating a piece of her ear, that triggers the question of, is that when the cannibalism started? With Lottie being this big time influencer amongst the group, and even having the kids do blood magic, did she co-sign with Shauna's situation? Did she decide, okay, this is how we're going to survive, and that's when we start getting the get-ups and everything? There's a lot to question in the past that we know affects the future, and because all these questions are so interesting, including the whole Misty situation, where what might have happened with Crystal, since I don't think Crystal was in the present day. There's so much to be invested in there, while when it comes to the present day, there isn't really much of interest beyond Misty, and that's just because Christina Ricci knows how to play this kind of character. Which is a second highlight in the form of Misty's investigation, since between her trying to figure out ways to make sure Sean and the rest don't get arrested or even questioned regarding the whole Adam killing, and then on top of that, her having to investigate what happened to Natalie, and eventually that going to her meeting Lottie in modern times, Misty has a lot going for her that is positive in this show, while everyone else is still kind of faltering or kind of feeling like they're still trying to gain their footing. Which is why, in terms of on-offense topics, Shauna and Taissa's marriages are seen kind of like a liability. The whole luster of Jeff and Shauna having a secret relationship has pretty much died, and I need her to move on to the next thing. Because having Callie be a threat to not only their marriage but also her personal safety is not doing anything for me. And sometimes it kind of makes me want to fast forward through her parts, but being that Shauna seems like the most likely to reveal something, you know you can't do that. And then when it comes to Taissa, she has so much potential, but it feels like it's being wasted. This whole Simone Sammy thing is nonsense that I wish would end already. Let them get divorced and let's move on. Especially since Van has an adult version that's going to be introduced sometime this season. So what happened to their relationship is something I really want to know about. Never mind. Let's tap into Taissa's black side through her mother so that we can learn when it comes to all this occult stuff that was introduced even before Taissa got into that plane accident. Let's go into that. Let's dig into what this weird entity that she becomes and what is a family curse or something much more sinister. Which leads us to the last on the fence topic, which is just what the adult version of Lottie may bring. And the reason why this is on the fence topic is, again, so much is done for the 1996 version of these characters to set up the adult versions, But what Lottie has to deal with on top of making this cult thing interesting is, unfortunately, she is now saddened with the burden of Natalie in Modern Times. In that scene in last season, Natalie in Modern Times is a character who's only as good as the person that she latches onto. She latches onto Misty, she's good, but if she's stuck with Travis in that whole investigation, she's a liability to the show. Liability may be a strong word, but I do feel that Natalie's made into a supporting character who needs a strong lead in order to guide her. Otherwise, she's aimless and doesn't give much to the show. But again, like what we said with Taissa, there's potential there, but there's a serious question of whether or not that potential is going to get realized. And it's not that I have low faith in adult version of Lottie, but I don't want it to be where we're coming up with all these theories and hopes and ideas, and then none of it happens, and we get this kind of shoddy plot, and it's just like you don't get rewarded for your loyalty or interest to the show. Overall, when it comes to the season premiere of Yellowjackets, it is a welcome return, but it still feels like some of the weaknesses of season 1 are lingering, particularly regarding the characters in Modern Times. But I will say, while there are definitely some blight spots, there is still so much potential when it comes to the show that you can easily see the show getting rid of all of its weak points and eventually building off of its strengths.